You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestel. Welcome to Mysteries and Monsters. As February has seen us continue to hunker down in our homes, with all the craziness going on outside in the real world, I thought I'd surprise you all with an extra episode to end the month. On this edition of Mysteries and Monsters, I'm joined by the Canadian psychic, Robert Lindsy Milne, now 72, to discuss his career over the last 56 years, as he's travelled the world, and how he has dealt with everything life has thrown at him over the decades since he started out in a Toronto tea room in the 1960s. We talk about his life, his thoughts, his experiences, and much more. I'm sure you'll find it a very intriguing conversation. A big thank you to Robert for joining me. Once again, a big thank you as always to everybody that keeps finding our pages and liking them across all social media platforms, subscribing on to the YouTube channel, and we've even had a few nice new reviews. If you get the chance, I'd really appreciate if you could leave me a review for the show. The more we get, the more chance we've got of discovering more like-minded souls who may appreciate this little gem. A big thank you to everybody that's taken the time to leave me a review. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. So, March is upon us almost. And what can I say? I've got some very exciting shows coming up. A couple of guests who have never been on the show before. A couple of subjects we've not touched on for a while. A couple of people I never thought I'd get the chance to speak to. So I'm very excited for what's coming up, and I hope you appreciate what's coming too. I'm sure you'll enjoy them all. I've got shows that are going to be covering ghosts, UFOs, alien abductions, a couple of cryptid creatures, and much more. So keep your ears peeled and see what's coming down the line. Before we join Robert, as always, the artwork for this week's show is by Dean Bestel. Brennan Storr has produced the show from the Ghost Story Guys. And Mysteries and Monsters is proud to be part of the Straight Up Strange network. Now, here's Robert Lindsy Milne to talk about his career and his life as a psychic. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Robert Lindsy Milne, one of the most well-known psychic, intuitive counsellors of his time. Robert, I'm delighted to welcome you to Mysteries and Monsters, sir.
And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yes, well, it took a bit of working out in the end. We had some technical issues when we tried to plan this prior to Christmas, so I appreciate your kindness and your flexibility in coming back.
It's great. I've been looking forward to this.
So, Robert, I was very intrigued whenever I have a new guest on. I always like to have a little look in their history and their resume and the like. And you are one of those people that kind of realised you were a little bit different at a very young age, I believe during a ice hockey game.
Well, actually, way before that, like, so at the hockey game where I was 9, but way before that, I have memories of feeling and sensing things. Like there was one time I had come home from school for lunch, and I was either in kindergarten or in grade 1. And when I got home, I said to my mother, Grandma Harris died today. Now, by the way, this would have been in 1955 or 1956. And I said, Grandma Harris died today. And Grandma Harris was not my grandmother, but my great-grandmother who lived in England. And I lived in Canada, and I had only seen her once in my life for a few moments. So I had no recollection of her. So anyway, I come home and I say, hey, but Grandma Harris died today. My mother got very upset for me saying bad things. I often got in trouble for that. And I was scolded, and most likely I was hit too. So the next night at dinner, we're sitting down, my sister, I, my father and mother. My mother said to my father, Grandma Harris died yesterday. And I thought my father was going to get angry with my mother for saying bad things. But he didn't. And they both talked about it. And I was astonished. So those type of things were happening to me and getting me into trouble, and I never understood why. And then came that evening at Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. And that's what you were looking at in my webpage. And my father and my father took me to an NHL game, Stanley Cup semifinal game, and it was Boston and Toronto. The series was tied 1-1, and the game was tied 1-1, just going into the beginning of the first overtime period. I became fascinated by number 17 with Toronto. His name was Gary Eman. And the teams were just on the ice having a little stretch before the game started, and I knew he was going to score. It was so real. It was hard for me not to believe that it wasn't happening or that it hadn't already happened. I was right in that mind space where you know, the future, the past, and the present all are happening right in that moment. Anyway. When the game was about to start, you know, the teams went on, sat on the bench, and by the way, Eamon wasn't a starting player. And we were at Maple Leaf Gardens. There were like about 18,000 people in the building, and the lights went down as the referee was getting ready to drop the puck. I couldn't hold it in anymore. And I jumped up and started to yell and scream and cheer with this silent building, right, of 18,000 people. And the entire building looks at me and my father, and he just put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Sit down." and the referee drops the puck. Game starts. A couple of minutes later, Eamon jumps over the boards, and a guy, number 4 with Toronto, his name was Red Kelly, flipped the puck to Eamon. Eamon tips it in the net. Maple Leaf Gardens erupts. And I'm sitting there looking around, realizing that nobody, not even Eamon, knew he was going to score. And while I was realizing that, the entire building was cheering, flashlights, you know, camera lights going off and on, and it was just an astonishing awareness. And that's when I knew that I was seeing things differently, and I also knew that I was going to be doing this for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Did you find that it was difficult to kind of find your place in the world at that period, Robert? Or were your parents, because I believe you've got Scottish heritage,
I do.
Were your parents quite supportive in regards to your gifts in regards to that? Because obviously there would be a tradition of a more sort of grounded...
Not in my family, man. So my father is 92. He's alive still. He just stopped working last February, February 2020, because of the pandemic. So you know, he's really bright, and my father had told me over the years that he believed his only son is a fraud and a charlatan, and on many occasions he told me that I was the only guy that he ever met that's never had a job. You know, like, these were not compliments, and you know, there was to a degree a strain between us for, you know, how I got to deal with it, and you know, it only took me about 50 years. How I learned to deal with it is I realized that I was never ever going to get an acceptance, and I just stopped trying to get it. And instead of getting, you know, looking for that recognition from my dad or, you know, people, I mean, I just started to look at me and doing the things that I'd been doing. I said, oh, okay, I'm really good with me.
Yeah. So it was basically you had to strike out at your own path and your own pace at an early age, then, Robert, I suspect.
At a very well, I grew up in a physically and verbally, emotionally abusive background. The first time I left home, I ran away at 14, and a few months later, the police brought me home. And then at around 15 and a half, in the fall of the year, I turned 15, because I turned 15 in the July that year. My birthday is in July every year. So I was on the street, surviving on the street using my instincts, intuition, my psychic skills to survive. And I survived through that time. And I was always presented with options of how to handle the problems that I would get into, or the difficulties that I would encounter. Because believe me, children on the street can accidentally get into a lot of trouble. So in every situation that I was faced with, or every problem, I always had the option to use my instincts, intuition, psychic ability, whatever it is that you want to call it. I always had the option of doing that, or an illegal or an immoral way. And most of the time, almost always, there were some times I didn't, but almost always I chose to use my instincts, my intuition's awareness, and follow those feelings. Incidentally, in those situations, looking back now, in those situations, there was no right or wrong answer. What was determined, though, it's like there was no right or wrong answer, but based on the decisions that I made, my life then would go in a certain direction. If I had made another choice, it would have gone in a different direction. So that really was the lesson. And a big part of the lesson is I honed my psychic abilities on the streets in downtown Toronto in the wintertime. And that's how I survived.
Yeah. Would you say that you were fortunate to find yourself in a situation where your gifts allowed you to be out there at a particular time where culture and the environment for young people of your age were going through some seismic shifts? Because obviously, we're talking about the early, late 50s, early 60s, Robert. So would you say that it was perhaps quite fortuitous that you were there at that period of time where perhaps people were looking for a more spiritual and enlightening path or guidance throughout that period, and you were able to sort of gravitate towards that kind of culture in Toronto?
Well, that's interesting, Paul. That's a really good question. However, being psychic and being spiritual are two different things. Someone can be psychic and not spiritual, and somebody can be it would be hard for somebody spiritual not to be not to be psychic, because you would have to be aware. Now let's go back just a little bit more. So when we talk about being spiritual, what they're saying is I'm good, I'm evolved, right? Like I'm a higher level being. That's what they're saying. However, that's not all spirituality is. Because in this universe, what we are one way, we must be equally the opposite. There are two sides to everything, and is a middle. So in spirituality, there are positive spirits, and there are negative spirits. So when someone says they're spiritual, that might imply that they're good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah.
There was a fellow named Anton LaVey in the 60s. He wrote the Satanic Bible. He also created the Satanic Temple. I think it was Satanic Temple of California. So that dude thinks he was spiritual. He worshiped the devil. He's not the kind of spiritual guy I'd want to hang out with, but he was spiritual nonetheless. So we have to be careful how we label those things. So being psychic is a natural instinct that almost all humans have, and just about all mammals have. Like we're mammals, so we have that basic instinct. Has there ever, like for you, Paul, have you ever been somewhere and you're just sort of hanging out and you look up and there's someone kind of looking at you? Or have you ever been hanging out somewhere and you look over and you're looking at somebody and then they turn and look at you? Well, that's the beginning of being psychic. That's the beginning. Now, most people have that ability. Now, it's natural. Now, if we take the entire world's population of humans and put them all together in a bell-shaped curve, at one end, there's going to be one person that has absolutely zero awareness or psychic ability. And then through that bell-shaped curve is going to be somebody else at the other end that is absolutely 100%. And then we're all somewhere in between. What we need to be aware of, so when we are developing our psychic ability, is that it's natural, it's instinctive, almost everyone has it, and identify what it feels like. And when I was teaching people how to do readings or how to be psychic, I would say to them, become aware of what's obvious. As soon as you become aware of what's obvious, then more becomes obvious again. And then as you see more that's obvious, your mind continues to expand until what you're seeing, and on the level that you're seeing it, is not obvious to others. So become aware of what's obvious. Open your mind. Now, that is what our ability, what we have as our instinctive abilities, we can make them really sharp. Often people that do this kind of work tend to lean in a more positive spiritual way. Obviously,
Toronto at that period, Robert, when you're sort of developing your skills, as you refer to, you were basically doing readings, and I found it quite interesting that it had to be done in a certain way because at that period there was the Witchcraft Act. So
that's correct.
You could essentially be prosecuted for giving a reading. So essentially, you were working on a principle of if you buy some tea, you'll have a reading, I presume.
Okay, so here's, okay, yes, that's true. So let me just, be out of that particular format for the moment about me and doing readings. So the Witchcraft Act was brought about in Canada in the late 1800s. And back in those days, Toronto, Ontario, these areas, we were a very waspy area, waspy as in white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and Presbyterian. So, Scottish Presbyterian and Irish Catholic, and, there's a group of tight asses, and so they were very, very restrictive in how they saw anything unless it was their religion. And any competition or anything different than what they believed was interpreted as evil. So there was developed the Witchcraft Act. And the Witchcraft Act basically said everyone who fraudulently, Section 1, tells fortunes for a consideration, Section 2, uses an occult or crafty science to heal someone, Section 3, use an occult or crafty science to accuse someone of a crime, is punishable by a summary conviction of not more than 1 year in jail or $5,000 fine. Now, that was taken off the books on July 1st, 2018. Honestly. And that year, our Prime Minister Trudeau, decriminalized fortune telling and legalized cannabis.
Yeah.
Same year.
Yeah, it is remarkable because we had a very similar situation here in the United Kingdom where the Witchcraft Act was still on the statute book. till about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Even though it hadn't been used in years, Robert. So I think it's one of those things that just gets left. And I think politicians are very sort of reticent about dealing with it, because as soon as you find out that politicians are discussing the repeal of a Witchcraft Act, it kind of it lights the powder keg in the media's eyes.
Yeah, well, it was very interesting, so from the time I started to work at that tea room, which I'll tell you about in a moment, and until July 1st, 2018. So that would have been, I started at the tea room on January 17th, 1965.
Yeah.
And up until 2018, the job that I did was against the law, and I could have been busted. And at times in my career, it had been used against me by some law enforcement agencies. So it was nice to be legal. That felt pretty good.
Yes.
But it was also anticlimactic. I'd never been busted, so I had heard if you worked at the Cozy Tea Room in Toronto, if you worked there in the afternoon, you would get a sandwich and a cup of tea and cookies. Mm-hmm. And you'd get paid at the end of the shift. And if you worked there in the evening, you got a hot dinner and a cup of tea and cookies, and you got paid at the end of the day. So I phoned the tea room and I spoke to Mrs. Cox. She was the owner, and I told her that I could do readings and could I get a job there? And she said that she was interested if I could do readings, and I showed up, and she was surprised that I was so young, but I did a reading for her. And now from that day back then until right now, I can't read tea leaves, but it was required that tea leaves be read. So what I would do is I'd pick the teacup up. It's a teacup up. Wow, that's right. So and I would pick it up and I would hold it in my hands in front of my face. With my arms straight out, and I would simply look at the person in front of me and do their psychic reading. And never mind the blobs of whatever it was at the bottom of the cup. I didn't care. I wasn't interested because I just tuned into that person. And then what they did to get a reading, when I first started, it was $2.50. And for that, you also got a cup of tea and a sandwich and cookies, and you got to have a tea leaf and card reading, just regular playing cards. Well, I had no idea what the playing cards meant or the numbers or anything. So I would just put them down on the table. I was as verbose as I am now when I was 15, and so what I would do is I would incorporate the cards, and I would imply that what I was saying I was getting from the cards. And the cards were irrelevant. I was just entwining them in how I was giving that information because that's just what I had to do. And I did that from day one. So I did a reading for Mrs. Cox. She hired me that day. I worked in the afternoon and I worked in the evening. And that day I had a lunch and a sandwich, and I had a hot meal. I had money to have a place to sleep that night, and I had a job to go to the next day. And I worked at the tea room until I was about 21. And during that time, I worked 5 days a week, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. And I practiced, and at the tea room, I would some days see 30 people, and then some days see 10. And by the time I was about 21, I'd done several thousand readings. So that's how I got off the street, and that's how I started developing my psychic ability. And by the way, when I left the tea room, I was around 21. I had decided during that time at the tea room that this is what I was going to do. I didn't want to do it in the tea room, but this is what I was going to do some way. And I had heard I wasn't Catholic or come from a religious background. So I had heard if when a young man becomes a priest, he makes a vow that he would do a mass every day of his life. So I decided that if I was going to be that committed to doing this, the vow that I took was that I would do at least one psychic reading or practice every day of my life. And I did that for about 30 years, and I never missed a day. Drunk, sick, happy, sad. I never missed a day, either of practice or of doing readings. And after about 30 years, there was one day that I decided not to practice or do psychic readings, and I just wanted to know what it felt like not to be psychic or not to practice anyway.
Yeah.
And then I went back to it again.
How does one begin to hone one's skills, Robert? Because that's what I've always been very interested about this, and I know you've touched on it in regards to that. How does, obviously, if you've got such a regular client base, and obviously your reputation preceded you at that period of your life, where I would presume people were wanting to come to you specifically for your...
At the tea room?
Yes.
Yes, well, in a relatively short amount of time, I was doing quite well. There were some, back in those days, where we worked was often a disgusting place. It was really low class. As cozy as the name of the tea room was, it was a dump. It was a dive. The type of people that were coming, well, there were all types, but the environment wasn't in the nicest part of town. And in those days, psychics, very few of us did well. Very few. And the everyday psychic basically did tea leaf readings on occasion over in their kitchen table. There were very few places to work. There were very few ways to advertise. People that wanted to do that as a full-time career job never made it. Often psychics in those days, many had serious drinking problems. They were living poorly. And I was one, I looked at that, and I said, I may have to do this here at the tea room, but this isn't the way my life is going to be. And I figured that out pretty early too. And question you asked earlier, I was there at the right time. Where things were just starting to open up. So I was there at the right time, and I was in the right state of mind, and I'd had 5-6 years of practice before anyone of my contemporaries were even thinking of doing readings. So I started, like when I left the tea room, I got fired at the tea room a lot. While I was disciplined and hardworking in terms of doing readings, I resented very much that this place. Well, the tea room they would charge $2.50. The tea room would get $1.50, and the reader would get $1. And while, that buck was a big deal for me when I was getting off the street, in a relatively short amount of time, I also figured out that, they were getting much more money. And the only way that they were getting this money was because of people like me. And what they were doing is making a living because of not my skills, but our skills. And we weren't being treated with particular respect either. So while I was hardworking, and the only reason they let me work there that long is because I was very quickly a good earner for the tea room. But over that time period, I got fired several times and quit several times too. But whenever, as Ren Day got closer, it was who's got the strongest will. Mrs. Cox to call me and see if I want to come back, or I call her to come back to, so I can make my rent money. So, there was a reason this kid was on the street. So, I had issues because of that too. So, I might not have been all that easy to be around, but I was doing good readings, and I was performing my skills. People were really surprised. So when I left the tea room, my life made a major change.
Was it perhaps that the environment you found yourself in at that period of your life, Robert, was it that perhaps gave you that drive to improve your ability and your skill, because you were looking around you at people that had probably done this for 20, 30 years, and you thought, I'm not going to be one of these people. I want to be better. I want to be better. I'm going to be better because of what you were seeing around you.
So Paul, there was one other one that when you say I will be better or whatever, there was something else that I became aware of at a really early time at the tea room. What was that? I am better. And the readings that I were doing for people were nowhere like, or the readings that they were getting from the tea leaf readers were nowhere near like what I was doing, even at that young age.
Yeah. So was it a case of realizing that perhaps your abilities and your the way you could utilize your gift was working in a very different way to the people you were rubbing shoulders with at that period, Robert?
I'm not sure if what I have being psychic is a gift. A gift is something that you just get. It's yours for free. You don't have to do anything for it. I've committed my life to do this. And it has been my main focus. Of course, I've had other things, in my life and families and things like that. But this has been the purpose. I've been dedicated to be the best that I can be. And that's the way I was at the tea room. And it was the way when I left the tea room. And there were times at the tea rooms, the way people would pay us, they would choose their reader. I was known as the long-haired, shoeless, hippie reader named Bob Milne. My real name is Robert Lindsy Milne, but I went by that. And people would choose me, and the way that the tea room could tell how many readings I did or somebody else, we used poker chips, and my chips were the turquoise one. So person would choose me, and they'd give that person the poker chip, and then when she'd come to me, I'd take the poker chip and cash it in at night. If I didn't think I did a good reading for the person, I'd give them back the chip. And from that day right up until right now, and for as long as I've been doing readings, I have guaranteed my work. Absolutely. And it goes from the day I do this reading until the ending of my life, or theirs, and I hope theirs first, I guarantee that they will believe they received a good service from me. And if for any reason they don't feel that, just tell me, I'll give you back your money. In the old days, I used to have to get the tape back, but now it doesn't matter. But I still do that. And I guarantee that. And there's no questions asked. What, you have a problem? Okay, here's your money back. And it's just, now I don't like doing that, but that is what happens.
Yeah. Has it been difficult, Robert, over the years? Because I can imagine, obviously I've spoken to people that have worked in different faculties of the paranormal and aspects of it, such as that, who have abilities in regards to being able to read rooms and communicate with people on the other side. And often I think people presume that it's like a tap, Robert. You can just turn it on and off as and when you wish, and without wishing to insult your intelligence or your...
Please do, stay straightforward.
Is this the kind of situation where you've had to learn to sort of be able to not tap into this at points, or do you sometimes get overcome by your ability in regards to the fact that you can't shut the information off that's coming through?
So sometimes that is the case, and as I'm getting older, it's sometimes harder to eliminate. So it's harder it is harder to detach from it. And when I'm going out, when I go to visit friends, well, since the pandemic, I haven't been seeing too many friends in person. But when I do, I always ask my friends, please tell me who else is going to be there, because I need to prepare. I need to have my shields or my defenses up. That's one thing. So as long as I have time to prepare, then it's okay. If I'm tired, I really need to prepare. Most times I can rise above it or look the other way. It's always there. That sense is always on.
Yeah, because like I say, when I've spoken to other people, they have to go through rituals or as you refer to there, Robert, in regards to trying to shield themselves, to disconnect or not be tethered constantly, because it can be very overpowering, I would imagine.
Well, for me, because I a lot of people want to label me a medium. Well, I'm not a medium. I'm a psychic. I'm an intuitive. I don't directly talk to spirits. I don't really have that kind of connection. Many people who know me think I do that anyway, because often my readings are a monologue rather than a dialogue. So when I do readings, I don't ask questions. I know two things. Well, I know a few things about my client, but at the beginning of the reading, I ask them two questions. How old are you? What month is your next birthday? Bang, we start the reading. And all my readings, by the way, get recorded. Always. That's been going on since like mid-1970s. And if somebody doesn't want the reading recorded, then I give them the name of somebody who will do a reading without being recorded. My readings always do. So I was one of the very few people that started to do that too, by the way. But so I just simply start talking. And when I do a reading for somebody, I often see their life in the overall from beginning from conception to completion. And I often see, although I'm focused more on where we are today, I don't have a ritual of getting psyched up, as it were. But I do, because when I'm going to do a reading, I will spend time thinking about being focused and won't really do anything of importance about a half an hour before a reading. And so I am actually preparing. Now, when I'm like as in, I don't do, I slowed my work down to, I'm only doing about 500 or 600 readings a year now. I'm really slowed down until recently. But when I was working full time, really focusing on it, I would see 10 people in a day. But now it was easier to do 3 readings in a row, 1, 2, 3. Than it is to do a reading, have a break, do another one, have a break. It's easier to stay in that state. So I get in the focus when I'm doing the reading, and then when the person leaves, I do whatever I do around here, and then the next person, and I start preparing just before them, and it's a mental exercise. I even start thinking about them, and that's how I get ready.
Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect that you refer to there, Robert, because I think that is often a misconception as well, that people presume that you can just turn it on and off and it has, no effect, or you're permanently on point, as it were, and you're always ready and available to do this. So I understand that aspect of it where you say it's easier to do 1, 2, 3 than it is to do 1, leave it, then do another one, because I would imagine you still got that mindset, you're still focused, you've still tapped into to what you're doing.
And when I was on tour, I used to, for almost 40 years, I traveled around most of the world, appearing on radio and TV shows. So when I would be away on tour, I would always travel with a full-time secretary. We'd go to a city, I would do a show, then we would do readings, and I'd be in the city for 3-4 days, and all I would be doing, one after the other, would be reading. So I was often always there in that state. Then when I would get home, I would shut down a bit, and because that's being on tour is different than working at home. So but it was easier to get into that mode when I was doing it like that over and over and over again on the road like that. At my age, it's a little harder to do. Yeah. So I'm down to about three a day. Yeah.
What I've often wondered, Robert, is it must be extremely difficult, I would imagine, as you refer to there, that you're able to see from conception to completion.
Yeah.
I would imagine that you've had to deal with some very damaging information, some very traumatic situations, and some very dangerous mentally.
There have. I don't talk about this very much, and over the years, I think you heard me, I said that there have been a couple, while I've never been arrested because I was doing psychic things, there have been a couple of times where the police asked me to get involved with something and flaunted the Witchcraft Act. And often, and I've never wanted to do, I never wanted to do missing persons work ever, never. And any time I did, I had to have the assurances of anyone I was working with, well, mostly the police. I had to have assurances that nobody would know that a psychic was doing this, and nobody would know, and the parents would never know that this would happen, and it be kept quiet. And I always had that agreement. I didn't want to be recognized. It wasn't, for me, that was me protecting me.
Yeah. I think it is a very dangerous line that sometimes people walk on.
Paul, the fear for me wasn't the danger of the job. The fear for me was I don't have whatever it takes. In those situations, most times when they come to somebody like me is when they're out of leads, they don't know what to do, and they're grasping at straws. And most of the time the person's dead. I don't have what it takes to tell somebody their child is dead. I just don't have it. I can't do it. I would hang my crystal ball up if that was what my job was. I can't do it.
Yeah, I think it takes a specific type of person to be able to do that. I mean, obviously the most famous example of that, I think anybody would know, would be Alison Dubois, who would famously worked with numerous cases and across numerous states in the US and in Canada as well, Robert. So for me, it's a very difficult line that people would walk on, and as you say, I think you need to be a specific type of person to be able to deal with the ramifications of what you're dealing with there, because as you say, these are very traumatic experiences, not only for the people who have got somebody missing, but I would imagine for someone such as yourself, that if you are involved in that type of thing, it would probably open your mind up to some horrific situations.
Well, it has. So, I can give you a couple. So, the other thing that I also teach, I don't do very much teaching, but I would always, anyone ever ask me advice, one of the things that I say is that remember, the information comes through you. It's not yours. It comes through you. And the energy that you're feeling from the person is coming through you. It's really important to make sure that it comes through you and doesn't stay inside you. because that's not your energy. And that's when you get hurt. That's when you have, I call it a psychic injury. Do you remember that movie, The Green Mile? Do you remember that movie? Okay, so remember that great big giant John Coffey? Being a healer, now that certainly was magnified and certainly exaggerated, but think of what John Coffey did. What he would do is he would hold somebody or a part of that injury, and he would take that injury, often take it into himself. And then what he would do is he would release it through his mouth, and it would be all those ugly looking moths or whatever. That energy, as long as he released it, it was okay. Then when they took John Coffey to heal the warden's wife of some kind of brain tumor, he knew John Coffey knew what was going on back at the prison. And when he healed that woman, he took all of her negative energy and kept it inside him. And it made him very, very sick and very, very weak. And then he went back to the prison, and it was when he got back to the prison, he directed all that negative energy to a couple of different people. But it made him really sick. Now, that's the Hollywood version of it. But that's what it's like. The energy's coming through and back. So by all means, do that energy work. Just don't keep it inside. So around just after apartheid ended, I had a tour of South. Actually, I had 3 different ones. I had a tour of South Africa with South African Broadcasting, and I went throughout the country on all the radio and TV shows. And one of the first stops was in Johannesburg, and I was on a show called the Felicia Show, and Felicia was the African, not South African, the African version of Oprah. Like, she was really big. And her show was live. And I was booked on that. And it was a live audience, and we were taking calls as well. So the audience was lining up and people coming to the microphones. And I told Felicia before the show, and I said, there's not very much you can do that would upset me or throw me off. I have only but one rule: no blood and guts and gore. And that's the deal. Other than that, we're good. So I'm on the show doing stuff for people, doing readings and being interviewed. And just as we're about to go to break, I see this one woman walk up to the microphone. And then we stopped for a break, and I leaned forward to Felicia, and I said, "See that woman that just walked up to the microphone? Not her, please." And Felicia said, "Okay." And at the time, I got up and left the set because it was a really intense place. And I was feeling energies. It was a very different environment. It was a new one to me. So I went back to get a drink of water. When I came back on the set, and the directors, doing the, 10, 9, 8, and then flashing the fingers, the countdown, I just sat in the chair. And I looked up, and guess who was standing right at the microphone? Was the very woman that I said, not her. And then Felicia just introduces me and then goes straight to that woman. And at the time, I didn't know why I said not her. I just didn't want to see her. And I really had trouble connecting with her. And I said to her, "So what would you like to know?" And she said to me, she said to me, my 11-year-old daughter went out several nights ago, and she hasn't come home. Now, this is live television. And she says, my little girl, and she said, will I ever see my daughter again? Or what happened to me? And what also happened is I saw what happened to her daughter. And there was, I could not say it. I just couldn't. And I held that in me. throughout the rest of the show. And it was good that I had some friends with me because I was so wiped out. You know, I went straight back to the hotel room, and it took me several days to get over that. Several shows were canceled because of that, and I was never really right on the tour. And it wasn't. Now, if I could have released the energy, there wouldn't have been a problem. So I would call that a psychic injury. If I'm ready, everything's fine.
Yeah. I would imagine for yourself, Robert, that's a very traumatic situation to find yourself in, because as you refer to, that's not the kind of information you like to impart to people, especially because of the subject matter. And I'm certainly not going to pry into that, because one can only imagine, especially in the country at that time. Anybody that knows anything about the period of time knows it was a very tumultuous situation, and there was a lot going on, to say the least.
There certainly was. Now we've concentrated on the dramatic, as in the horrible. On the other hand, more of my work has been healing, showing somebody how to get past the problem, issue that they're going through. So we've been talking about the spectacular, but the major part of my day-to-day work is dealing with people that are going through everyday real life, but normal day-to-day issues.
Yes, yeah. I think often, Robert, it is, and looking at the testimonies you have and the people that have come to you for support and guidance and assistance, a lot of them are very positive in regards to the fact that you seem to have sort of lifted a veil from their eyes, or guided them, or in that regard, if that makes sense, that they feel that once they've spoken with yourself, they've been able to actually reconnect with their lives and move forwards.
Sure. So I asked some people to write testimonies, and I asked people, and some people said, "What do you want me to say?" And all I said was, I want you to say what you experienced. And I didn't really read them, that the things that they gave me, to the testimonies, and I really didn't pay that much attention. And last week I transferred those testimonies to the web designer, and I said, I want this authentic. Don't change any spelling. Don't change any grammar. Not even any of the font. Not even any of the punctuation. Exactly the way the person wrote it. On Friday night, I looked at my brand new website, and I looked at the testimonies, and I cried. Yeah, it was like they were talking about somebody else. It was. I never really believed that I had helped like that. It was really a beautiful experience, Paul. Yeah. It was just really special.
Yeah. When you find situations like that, and you have that kind of response to what you've done to people, Robert, as you say.
How about with?
Yeah. Yeah. All four, rather. Yes. Yeah. Sorry about my syntax there. I would imagine it gives you a sense of purpose and makes everything that you've gone through worthwhile, no doubt.
Well, it is my purpose. So years ago, and I was one of the first traveling performing psychics. I was one of the beginning ones, and in those early days, in those mid 70s, like it was just unheard of. People going on the radio and telling, and I really did put on a good show, and the things that I did psychically for people. And at that time, there wasn't anyone, it certainly wasn't anybody in Canada doing it. And there was a huge response. And I charged I probably I charged more money back then than I had ever charged in my life, and I was charging $80, and I was doing half-hour sessions, but I was on the road. I had a full-time secretary. We were flying all over in hotels and partying like crazy at night too. So we're out in Vancouver, and I'm being interviewed by a young woman who was very masculine in her appearance, in her mannerisms. She was very masculine, and she was crabby too. And she was interviewing me, and she was asking me these questions, and I think I might have been about 27 or 28. And she said, so you do readings. How much are your readings? And I said to her, they're $80. And she gets the stern look, and she said, well, how long are your readings? And I said, they're half an hour. And she got outraged, and she said, you charge $80 for a half an hour? Oh, she went on this rant. And I looked at her, and she went on this great big rant, and finally, she said, how come you charge $80 a half an hour? And I said, because I can't get 100. And then this woman just went ballistic. She just melted down. And then she said, you're gonna lose your gift. And then she said, what are you gonna do with your life when you lose your gift? And I stopped, and I got really serious with her. And I said, well, I never would lose my gift. But if I did, there would be no purpose for my existence. And that was true then, and it's true now.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation, Robert, where, as you've referred to earlier, if you're feeling tired or drained or whatever, you can sometimes it takes more of an effect or something. Have you ever gone through a period of your life where perhaps it's been harder to use your gift, or has it been something that you've been able to do that through practice?
There was a period, so specifically for me, the absolute worst time over a period of time happened around, I was about 31, 32. I was still traveling and doing shows and on the road a lot. Somewhere along the line, somehow I stopped believing that I was psychic. And I stopped believing that I really had a talent. And I started thinking that I was a fraud, that I was a con artist. And when I'm doing readings, I see things not on a line, but I see things, and what I'm speaking about and what I'm thinking about can be two very different things. And sometimes what I'm speaking about, what I'm saying, I'm also thinking about what I have said, what I want to say, and sometimes all at the same, thinking about what I'm going to be doing later on in the day. And if you imagine like 4 TV screens, each one on a different channel, that sometimes happens. Well, when I was in my 30s, maybe there were only 3 channels. There were only 3 screens. But now there's a whole lot more. So I would be doing a reading for somebody, dealing with their most intimate, personal things, and I would be hearing in my voice, fake, liar, cheater, fraud. It was horrible. It took, I went through that for about, I think about 8-9 months.
Yeah.
That was agony.
Yeah.
Agony.
So, did you have to kind of go back to basics at that period of your life, Robert, to reconnect with your abilities, or was it a case of perhaps it was just a bit of self-doubt coming through because you were pushing yourself so hard?
I think all of the above. All of the above. The other thing, I guess, now I am, thank goodness that I went through that period. And here's the reason why. During that period, I realized more clearly than at any other time before that was that I could actually think about one thing and be talking about another. Then I realized that that I could think and do that. Then what happened is I started practicing doing thinking like that. And when I started practicing thinking like that, I got fresh again. But then what I did was I started, because what had happened back in that really awful time, and remember, I'm doing tons of readings. Like I said, I turned 72 in this coming July. Now at this age in my life, I've slowed down. I only do like 500 or 600 a year. So and there are some people in my craft that's never done that many in a year. So and I'm slowing down. So I've always done lots because that's just the way I was trained. When I started recording, and because I realized that I was seeing things from many different angles, and no matter what the job is, there's always fillers that you can put in. There's always tricks of the trade. So sometimes between one thought to another, there could be a gap, or there could be a filler that you could just keep the person's attention, or you could say something that's going to always be right just to keep the energy flowing. Here's how you can tell from any psychic, if you're getting a reading from them, what's filler and what's not. Here's how you can tell. As you can hear me speaking, there's that energy in my voice. When someone said something 1,000 times, there's no energy in it. So when you're getting a reading from somebody and you hear them say something and there's no energy, it's flat. It means that they've said it 1,000 times. And that's okay. That's okay because, you got to keep the energy going. But what I do now, or started years and years ago, is I started every month, I would sit down and listen to 2 or 3 readings that I had done in the past. And I've been doing this for years. And I listen to how I say things. I listen to the words I use. I listen to my tone of voice. And I make sure that if I have a filler, I make sure it's fresh. And at this stage in my life, I say 100,000 psychic connections. Well, I stopped counting about 15 years ago. So at this time in my life, so I've had more than 100,000 psychic connections. How many times of that 100,000 do you think I talked to somebody that had a love problem? Now, what I make sure, and I am very clear, I make sure that even though I might have said something 50,000 times or 10,000 times, I make sure that when I say it to the person I'm doing a reading for, I make sure that I remember I'm saying it to them for the first time, and I keep it fresh and real and alive.
Yeah, I suppose
that was some kind. Aren't you sorry you pressed the button and let me go? I'm sorry about that.
Well, no, that's all right, because I think it is one of those things, because as you refer to there, Robert, it would be very easy to just go through the standard tropes every time you get the same kind of queries as you refer to, because no doubt you will have a selection of problems that people will come to you that are probably, you could...
Absolutely.
You can, without wishing to pin you down on anything as trivial as a top 5 or a top 10.
Okay, so let me just sort of give you an example. And sometimes, by the way, I would get influenced by statistics.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to get I'm going to be influenced by statistics. If I know, ballpark, if I know that in this particular situation, the statistics say 93% of the time it works out that way. Well, I wished I could be bloody fit 93% accurate, so in the statistics, it's 93%. What I do is I tell my client, so this is the statistic, 93%. There's 7%. What you just have to decide, are you in the 7%? That's what you have. Now you're in a good cycle, but it depends on what you want. So that's how I often deal with that.
Yeah, I mean the other difficult aspect I would imagine is trying to support and give people guidance when you, without wishing to sound churlish, without somebody coming to you with the same old problems day after day after day, Robert.
Okay, so here we have to go back a little bit. So, well, a long way back. All my life, while having an independent, singular path, as it were, all my life I've been protected. All my life. Now, that doesn't mean my life has been easy. It just means that when I'm really in trouble, I always get help. Okay, so like if I really need, I always receive. So there was this time, I don't know, maybe 25. You know what? It was exactly right around the time that I was talking about that horrible period. Oh, this is such a nice story. It was right during that time when I had lost it. There was a woman. Her name was Elizabeth Tessier, and she was considerably older than me. She was from the Netherlands, and she was this brilliant astrologer. She was in Toronto, lived in Toronto, and she had the Institute of Astrological Study, and people came from all over to study under Elizabeth. Elizabeth was when she saw my chart. I was seeing a class there one night. I was just curious what goes on in an astrology class. And I was in my, early 20s. And she had my chart, and it was in a pretty big room in our classroom. And she looked at my chart, and she said, "Where are you?" And she said, "Wow." And she went on to say that my astrological chart was basically what my chart said is that what I'm doing is exactly what I was meant for, and that she said that in all her years she'd never seen a chart that was more suited to doing this work. And she developed a motherly connection with me, a protection. And whenever I got messed up, she would help me. And it was at the end of all those tours when I was hating what I did, and I lost my belief. I went to her, and at that time, Paul, I really believed my life was over. I believed it. I just thought it was it. And when I went to see Elizabeth and she did her reading for me, I don't quite know when it happened, but when I was leaving, I was feeling lighter. And I got out on the street, and I was feeling lighter and lighter. And as I walked down the street, I all of a sudden knew that I was going to be okay, that I was going to survive, and that I was going to be happy, and that my life wasn't over. And the relief and the joy that I felt was just overwhelming. And then I said, "This is what you do for people, Robert." And I got past it.
Yeah.
That's how I did it, Paul.
Is it something that's continue to do when you've moved on through those periods, Robert, that you've sought guidance and assistance from others, or is it you've now learned?
Usually what happens is they come to me. Usually that's what happens. They come to me.
Yeah.
What would be an emergency? Well, 15 years old in a blizzard. I would have asked.
Yeah.
As a child that, got to live crap beat out of me, I learned to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
I believe that what we are one way, we are equally the opposite. And I further believe that karma is neither reward nor punishment, but merely what we do one way, we must do equally the opposite way. That's what karma is. In order for us to know joy, we need to know sorrow.
Yeah.
In order to know success, we need to know failure. In order to know good, we need to know bad. So in order for us to experience something, we will not can, we will do the opposite. The things that I've lived through that I did, the glorious side of it, it's been well worth it all. There are very few things that I would change in my life. There's a few things that I've said that I would change. There's but not very many things. And if this is my last minute on the planet, I'm going out saying, has this ever been a great ride? and that's how I feel. And I would not change any of the difficult times because it would have minimized the great times.
Yeah. Is it a situation, Robert, that even now, after 56 years, you're still learning?
Every moment of the day, and that's a wonderful question. And the ways that I'm learning, well, on the street too, but the ways I'm learning is identifying concepts and putting them together. It's been really profound.
Yeah. Is it given you that kind of framework that's allowed you to improve and become better then, Robert, do you think?
I still practice every day. And at my age, I see things broader, clearer, on levels that I never imagined existed at this time. And I love doing my work more now than I have ever loved it. I'm better at it than I've ever been. I just can't do it quite as much.
Well, after 56 years, I think you do deserve to take your foot off the pedal a little bit, Robert.
Yeah. So, but now I have to tell you though. But so about 9 years ago, 8-9 years ago. So up until those times in my 50s and through into my 60s, I still did shows. It was like I was enjoying it less and less. And I was on the highest rated radio station in Canada, and I was on the highest rated radio show in at the station. So like this was like the number one. The show started at 9:05. I was on till 9:55. Come on, 9:05. At 9:15, I was doing calls, right? At 9:15, I looked at the clock and I said, "Oh shit, 40 more minutes of this. I can't stand it." And I decided that moment that was the last show I was ever going to do. Now this wasn't, oh my God, it's over for me. It was, hey, you've had this amazing career. You just don't like doing shows anymore. Yeah. So it wasn't like devastation. It was just, I hate doing it now again. Yeah. So I stopped. And then, I decided I was just going to be an old-fashioned kind of psychic, just staying at home, not doing lots of traveling and doing lots of readings at home. And that went on for about 8-9 years. And on my website, there's talking about that book, The Perfect Predator. And I got involved with that. It was a guy that caught a superbug that was 100% antibiotic resistant, and his wife, who's an epidemiologist and a long-term client of mine, she and I helped her find the cure, or me and a lot of other people. But I had a part of saving Tom's life, and there's a book out called The Perfect Predator, and I'm recognized in the book. Since that time, I had gotten a lot of requests to do shows, but I just didn't want to do any. And last June, I appeared on one. It was I think it was called Midnight FM, and it was really a lot of fun. And the producer the next day asked me would I like to do other shows, and I said, well, no, I'm kind of semi-retired, but thanks. And I thought about it through the summer, just last summer, and I thought that was a lot of fun. And then I spoke to her again, and she said, by the way, I'm a publicist as well, and one of my companies, and if you would like, I can book you on shows. And I thought, let's see what that's like. And since that time, I've been doing like 4 shows a month and having this absolutely wonderful time in my life. And all of a sudden, I'm working full time again, and I'm growing, and I have a brand new website, and I'm dealing with people from all over again, and it's wonderful. I'm in the peak of my career, and I'm 72. It's beautiful.
So no sign of you slowing down. You seem to have found a nice balance then, Robert, as you've dealt with things, and as all of us have over the last 12 months around the world. We've all had different challenges and different aspects of our lives, but so for you, you're in a good place and happy with where you are right now.
Happier in myself than at any other time in my existence.
And that's always a good place to be, my friend.
It certainly is.
So, Robert, what's next for you, and what have you got coming up, or is it just a case of you're going to carry on doing your readings and people can
I'm doing
find
shows.
You? Yeah.
I'm doing shows. I'm doing readings. Now, I'm at the point now where I can't keep up with all the calls that are coming in and booking all the appointments. Isn't that a problem, eh? And so the next step is I am going to be getting an assistant, and I want to continue reaching out. What makes this so much better for me is that doing readings online, most of them are done, my psychic readings are done through video. And that's really very fulfilling for me. So this morning, I did a reading for a woman in Montreal. Just before speaking, before our interview, I did a reading for a woman in Los Angeles, and at 6 o'clock my time, which is about 11 or 12 o'clock your time, I'm going to be doing a reading for a woman in Brisbane, Australia. I love that shit, I love it. I love doing that. Sometimes what happens is I love doing it so much I end up just like talking with the person and then like going on for it's wonderful. So I really truest. I am expressive and I can get in touch with the areas when things aren't so good because I resonate. Now, another thing, Paul, I've been in therapy since I was about 16 years old, and there has never been a time where I haven't been doing some sort of inner work on myself. I've all, and that's and it's what I owe myself, so that I can heal from how I was injured, and because I'm so focused on my healing, I can help others heal.
Yeah, in case of utilising your own personal experiences and trauma in regards to benefiting others then.
When I talk to somebody who has PTSD or trauma, any kind of trauma disorders, when I talk to them and talk to them and explain what they're feeling when their mind has frozen, not from the way I read it in a book, but the way I lived it myself.
Yeah.
And when I say that with someone, they listen and they learn and heal. That's the benefit of having all this trauma.
Yes.
Is how many people I can help.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose that's what we should all do with our life experiences, is to try and support those that are going through very similar things.
Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, we also have to have idiots doing the opposite so that we can make comparisons and evolve.
Yeah, very true. Very true, Robert, very true. Well, Robert, listen, it's been fascinating speaking with you this evening.
My pleasure.
Where can everybody keep up to date with your work and find your website, sir?
All you have to do is Google robertlindsymilne.com, and that'll take you right to my brand new website. There's a couple of little spelling mistakes. We're getting all that sorted out, but come and take a look and give me a call.
Brilliant. Well, listen, it's been a real pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for your time today. It's been very enlightening.
Thank you.
I will put the links to your site in this week's show notes, as always, and I will wish you the very best for the rest of the day. And you take care,
And you
Robert.
too. Thanks, Paul. Bye-bye.